So this should be, I think, like our final one of the modules that we wanted to kind of cover, just to, the main goal that we kind of reiterated this whole time is that we just want to standardize our processes to make sure that we're all doing things the same, that, the expectations that bidders or other agencies have when they see like our bids online, follow the same format for the most part. So that's what the goal of this is today. So this is some of the stuff we're going to go over is the naming convention for solicitations on NGEM and on the G drive, standardizing how we list items on each tab, again, naming and order of bid attachments, verbiage for when we issue addendums, as well as expectations for our involvement with when there's a RFP or an RFQ that requires a committee, interviews, evaluation meetings, all of that. And then I'm going to go over the evaluation module in NGEM that I've used on a couple of bids. So that way we're going to start moving towards using that as opposed to having any spreadsheets where we're storing on Excel or anything like that. And I have a couple of examples to show you of what that looks like through the really nice reports, but it just reduces the chance for error and whatnot. So for the most part, we do follow this naming convention, but in terms of the bid number format, I've got an example down there, and that you're doing the next number that's on the bid folder sign out sheet. There have been some bids out there that haven't had the type of ITB, or sorry, the type of bid that it is in the solicitation, because you're choosing the bid type as well, but we want to have the type that it is with the number as well. Okay. And same with the format, should also include the institution as well, and the G drive should follow the same format, so that way if any one of us is looking for a bid, we know what school it was for, or if it was niche-y. And then the only difference is that the G drive would also include the buyer's initials that was working on it, as we don't list that on the bid that's online, but just providing consistency. So when you are selecting that bid type, just making sure that you're also moving that with the number.
I always put a number simple. I always do out of habit.
So it's kind of all over, but just so that way we're, again, just consistent. And I do have examples that Desi will put in kind of like the job aid articles that she's going to create off of this recording, but on the event details tab, including kind of a brief description of the scope or a reference to, if you have a separate scope of work or statement of work document, where they need to go for the information. On the activities tab, including anything that's relevant to the solicitation. So keep in mind, like if you tend to get calls about like, when do we think this is going to be awarded? When do we think this is going to be shortlisted? When do we think the work is actually going to start? If you're getting those questions pretty frequently, it's, okay to put that out there. And the way that I have all of mine listed is that this is a tentative date and it's subject to change by buyer. Like I have that disclaimer on everything, like even if I have it, the title of the bid activity, I have estimated award date, estimated, interview period, but just so I'm giving them some, something, and it kind of just reduces all of the inquiries that you're getting. Or if you get it from one person, having to update everybody, about it, it's all out there.
Okay.
And again, then that usually should follow, chronological order anyway, naturally, but just trying to put as much as you can kind of out there. Okay, so this is for the bid attachments. So the way that I had originally, when I set up NGEM and I was going off of all of our hard bid documents, I had split up each of those like sections that were in our hard bids and put them online in our library in the same order because it made sense. And I think we may have even had a table of contents at some point, but kind of trying to follow a similar pattern of like when it's going to be incorporated into a contract, like what takes precedent. And having anything that is specific to that particular bid with the bid number at the top. So that way, again, it's all right, at the very beginning, it's not kind of mixed in the middle or at the bottom. And then everything that is like our T's and C's, our general terms and conditions, our, the proposal preparation, the bidder instructions, that all of those kind of follow. And then again, any like templates that we have, like for our construction bids, for instance, I have the template contracts, the template bonds, like all of that down at the bottom, and they're noted as such, like template, for review only, like subject to change, but just so that way it's out there. But again, because, and especially like with my bids, for instance, bidders get used to where those things are at all the time and they don't question where something is. And same with if I do an addendum, it's at the very top because it's the very last document that I touched. I always put it basically in order of like priority, but then also like most recent to oldest, essentially. So that way, again, it's just, it's cleaner, it makes more sense to our bidders, it, you know, it's less confusing, all of that. And that's essentially what I've like noted here. And then just keeping it that way for every solicitation. So that way, when you're going in to copy, you know, one from another, you're just deleting those top couple and inserting the new ones. Any questions about that? Okay. Now, again, this is standardizing things, how they're listed. We are going to standardize the types of bid attributes that we have. So that way they're the same across all of the types of bids. In this example, I'm getting the one for RFP. So again, kind of in order of priority, you know, that they're acknowledging all of the RFP documents. So that includes all of those specific documents like scope of work, statement of work, the one that is acknowledging all of the addenda, that they're acknowledging our terms and conditions, our proposal instructions. We have the disclaimer that general counsel had put together regarding confidential proprietary information. And then also the business license requirement, like this specific wording, because it's not, they don't necessarily need to hold one when they are submitting a bid, but they need to have an active state of Nevada business license prior to going to contract with us. So it's a very different requirement, and I've seen kind of all over the place a little bit. And then that bottom one was another one that general counsel had given me years ago, and I've never even been questioned by it, so I'm not really sure, yeah, how that applies, but threw it in there to kind of standardize it. And for the most part, the ITBs followed, you know, the same exact process. The only difference is, and again, I'll have that as an example, is one that we have related to required insurance and pointing them to risk management. So that way, when risk management updates their website, and if it's not communicated to us, at the very least, they're aware of like, what's the most current requirements. Anybody have any questions? Same with the response attachments tab, standardizing, the same thing. And you'll notice that a couple of these I have as like, they're not required because again, that business license requirement is not required when they bid. So it's optional, but if they already hold it, they can submit it at that point. And also having an exceptions one listed, but again, it's not required because they don't take exception to anything, they don't need to upload it. But it's calling out that we're, you know, because I've had people who are saying, well, we weren't sure where to put the exceptions or whatever. And, you know, it just, again, is like another place where it's listed, they have the opportunity.
As a reminder.
As a reminder.
Okay.
All that. And I think it may not be on the previous menu. But I do have one on my bids where if they have, it's something related to exceptions, like if bidder has exceptions, they've uploaded a document noting as such for review or something like that. Okay. So it's in a couple of different places. And that has been helpful to me recently because I've had people who have not asked questions during a question or answer period and then, you know, didn't submit exceptions and then they try to say that they didn't know. Well, you've had multiple different like opportunities to either upload it or ask the question. For issuing addendums, there is that issue reason, and just again standardizing the verbiage. This, I have boilerplate language that I use that I have here noted, and it's basically I'm noting exactly what I'm doing. I'm uploading an addendum document, answering questions received by the cutoff date, and where I'm putting it to, the attachments tab for this bid, and that I didn't make any other changes. I did this because of how many questions I was getting related to exactly this. I see an addendum was issued. What was it for? Where was it posted? What were the, and if it's like addendum number 2, because addendum number 1 was me just uploading a job lock signage, for instance. And I point them, and the thing is too, is that anytime I do an additional addendum, I always reiterate what the previous ones were. So that way, if this is the first time they're seeing addendum, you know, this addendum, they don't send me an email or call me about what addendum one was because I already have it noted in there. It was for this. Okay. And it just, again, I've just noticed that it helps reduce the number of calls that I'm getting, but again, you know, along the vein of trying to standardize what we're doing.
a call 2 times. Just
Yeah.
kidding.
Yes.
And you know, so I just got
What's
sick of
this
saying it. Yeah, I just got sick of saying it.
Over and over and over and over again.
So that's why it evolved the way it did based on all the calls I was getting.
So I have a question about questions. About questions. When they ask a question, can I answer it on the reply of the question they're answering?
The only ones I do are ones that wouldn't, it's very infrequent that I do it because I've noticed that even though it says it's public, there have been people who told me they don't see the response.
Oh,
And doesn't
Yes.
it get issued to every single person, like,
Right.
that's not,
It
that's
depends.
in their spend, or in their, you know, that got the original bid?
It depends, like they are supposed to. I know that if they log in, so if they miss that email for some reason, I think that's the only way they could potentially get the answer. Because where I've had an issue is I've had bidders tell me that they logged in and they can only see questions they've submitted.
But
Even
no
though
one-
it says public on
Right.
somebody else, it's not showing them other questions asked.
Oh, interesting.
So,
Okay,
Well, and for consistency, I think they should all be on the agenda.
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So, yeah, I'm trying to think of, like, I mean, it's been very infrequent. I can't even think of an example of why I would.
I had a
So-
person, they wanted to know where the job block was. The job block was happening before the questions cut off, so we answered that one on end,
On NGEM, it's.
because they just,
Yeah.
there's like, when's the job block? Well, it's tomorrow, and it's on the event details tab that I mean.
Actually, I think that's a
Answer
good
right there.
example of when I may have answered, because I didn't think it warranted an addendum where I just, because everybody else, you know, knows, and I'm like, please look at the, like, bid activities. Like that, I don't give them the information. I tell them, just look on the bid activities tab.
I think that was the verbiage you
For the
gave me.
information.
It
Yeah,
doesn't cover the original information at all.
Yeah,
If it's included, I
Yeah.
imagine that response is fine.
yeah, I think that's the only, like, that's kind of one of the only times where I'm basically just directing them to where the information is, you know, because they just haven't tried, they haven't looked for it themselves.
I see, okay.
So, yeah, but other than that, everything goes on.
An addendum,
Mhm.
questions and answers, like you'll take the questions from Excel
Yes.
spreadsheet and put them on an addendum and then answer the questions.
Yes, and I don't include who submitted it. Except like, I'm trying to think, I mean, I do to the department, you know, because for us, I guess it's a little bit different for the most part, because we have to send them like as we get them, so they can send them to an engineer and architect to
Mhm.
work on like immediately. They can't wait for
Right,
the addendum document once the question period's done. But other than that, like when I, like for an RFP, if I were to download everything at once, I don't send them like who. I just don't like to bias them
Yeah,
at all.
I
Sure,
don't either,
sure.
yeah, then they'd be like,
calling them
we don't want
directly.
this person
Yeah,
to bid
yeah,
on it.
Yeah, I only ever do, I always do the question, the answer, yeah.
Like the olden days.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And if something were to warrant doing an addendum before the question cutoff date, then I make that call or I put it back to the department, you know, hey, do you feel like this is relevant? You know, and do you have anything else at this time that you would want me to release at the same time, so I'm not doing extra work?
Duplicate, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, okay. As far as committee evaluation meetings and interview, so I think for the most part, we're all doing this, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. That when there are meetings with a review committee for an RFP or an RFQ, that we should be attending those. So I know for me, they're mostly virtual. I don't know if a lot of your guys are in person or not, but essentially that they're just following the proper protocol, you know, that they're not saying anything undue, like, you know, to other committee members, especially if it's somebody that they're reviewing that we've had an established relationship with for years, that, you know, they're gonna just,
They just put them much together.
yeah, or they're gonna just give them, it's basically keeping them from any impropriety. Keeping everybody honest.
Yeah.
But also it gives them the opportunity to ask us any bid specific, you know, questions, next steps, you know, about where to go from there, you know, what we're gonna handle on their behalf, if we're gonna coordinate scheduling, you know, with shortlisted firms, so on and so forth. And same with interviews, that they're not asking the firms or making any promises to the firms, you know, again, just keeping them from any impropriety.
Yeah.
So we should be at all those
And
meetings.
if you ever have a occasion where you're gonna be away for some reason and you need someone to step in for you, please just let us know and we'll make sure that someone can attend on your behalf.
Yes. Let's see, and for example, when I am conducting, like for the committee meetings, I generally let like the person who's the chair, be the one that directs it all. But when it's the day of the interviews, like I'm basically acting as kind of a co-moderator with the chair of kind of kicking it off, like, hey, I just want to remind you, you have this many minutes for your presentation that needs to cover, all of the evaluation criteria listed in the bid, followed up by a 15-minute, question and answer period by, the committee. Feel free to ask questions during, during or save them to the end, whatever they prefer. But basically, I'm just reiterating what the requirements are and letting them know that we're going to hold them to that, allotment, so that way it's fair for any other shortlisted firms as well.
Okay, so interviews and like PowerPoints, presentations.
Mhm. Yeah. Any questions about that? Okay, we're gonna go into this one second. So, let's see. Oh, I think that was the only website I didn't open. NGEM. But everything else. Let's take a break for a second.
And their password requirements are off the rails. It's like 20 characters.
Yes.
But you need to change
Special
it every
characters,
4
everything,
months.
yeah.
Do you guys want the door open? Okay, make it hot.
A little stuffy.
Just a little bit.
All right, so. Okay, so when you're drafting an RFP or an RFQ, you do like your normal draft like you would, but for the evaluation piece, it's going to be here under actions. And mind you, the reason we're doing this recording is because there's not a lot of documentation from IronWave on this process. There's just a million webinars that you have to kind of sit through. So we're trying to develop our own until they get documentation on how to do this. But you're going to go to evaluate. Now, what's beautiful about this is this very first screen where we set up down here on evaluation terms, this is taking the place of them having to sign NDAs because we're putting all of the information here for them to acknowledge ahead of time. And you can't see it in this screen, but when they get it, the committee members down here at the bottom, they have to check a box and type their name before they can even access any of the documents. Once they do that, that's essentially them. Well, first of all, they're also agreeing to like no conflict of interest, the NDA, and then we have this just for niche employees that they acknowledge, that they could be disciplined if, there's anything untoward. So, and you have the requirement here that they have to agree to those terms. Gonna kind of show you the different areas that I have on here. So you can create multiple different scoring rounds. So for instance, in this case, I opted to be the one to qualify the submittals as being correct before the committee evaluated them based on the actual evaluation criteria that was in the bids. So a little clunky, and that's why I also have this up here, which I don't even know how it's going to be useful later on. I kind of need to see if we'll continue to do that. But let me see, I'm going to go through each of these before I go into these. These instructions, I worked with another agency that has been using this module for a while to kind of go off of what they include in their bids. And I haven't included anything here because in the attachments, I created a scoring rubric for the evaluators, so that way they know what to use. And again, we want to standardize this. And this was the only document that NGEM actually did provide that was useful, which is the evaluator instructions. So this is something that I send to like the committee chair or the entire committee for how they're going to access the bids once it's closed. And it gives them all of that information. It also tells them, you know, once they're able to access it, like what they need to do to score each section, so on and so forth. So I have those as files that will be copied for every single
So
one.
then they'll be able to download the bid from NGEM too, you don't have to send it to
Yeah.
them anymore?
Correct.
It's
And I'll
a-
show
it's a
you what it
beautiful
looks like.
process.
Yeah,
It's cool.
it's just clunky that we don't have instructions, so figuring out all the pieces was a little difficult.
Yeah.
But this rubric that I have in terms of like, it's like a 1 to 5 scale and the definition of what those mean, essentially. So that way we have it for every single bid, it's not bid specific. And then the audit history, so I think, yes, so this is literally the only place that you can see where one of the evaluators has accepted the terms and conditions, because Mel and I were looking for this the other day. So it'll show you right here, evaluation terms agreed to, evaluator now active, and the person that it's for. So this is gonna serve as like our documentation that we have NDAs and conflict of interest agreed to by the evaluators. And it keeps you, it also tells you kind of where the team is at. But the other thing you can see, let me take a look. I'll show you that one in a second. It shows you right here their progress too. So this is easier. Like a nice line, like when
Under
you're,
team.
yeah. So if it wasn't complete, it shows you that it's like still missing, you know, a certain amount. I think it's actually yellow.
And even better, we've used this for 2 RFPs at
Mhm.
least too. When the committee chair is asking like, where is so-and-so at? It'll even show us they haven't even accessed the system.
Yeah.
So you can say they haven't even logged in.
It just shows active, like that, then it shows invite sent.
Yeah.
That's all it shows when they haven't even accessed the system, which I don't know. Let me just see if I have it on the other one. I know I had to delete some people. It shows nothing. But that is really helpful because I just do a print screen of that section. So, and then I tell them, okay, the people who are listed active haven't even accessed the system. I can go ahead and resend an invite. So that way it's like top of their inbox. Or I show, like the biggest issue I had is that they weren't hitting the submit button, which I need to look and see actually if that was, if that's shown on the instructions, but I'm gonna go through and show you what that looks like as a evaluator. Okay, so this first one, and one of the things that Desi is gonna assist me with in this is that we're gonna build a library. I already have a bit of the most commonly used evaluation criteria, so you're not, because doing it for every single one is very cumbersome. You can, but it'll be easier if we just have a library there and you're just dragging and dropping the evaluation criteria you need. But right here, you know, when you're starting the scoring round, this is the one that I did where I'm qualifying the submittals to make sure that they have the basic information that we requested, so that they have a technical proposal, a pricing proposal, a business license, or a professional license, something along those lines. And right here is where you can list what documents are available, which obviously for me, all of them are going to be available since I'm the buyer. There's nothing that shows up on the attachments because there was nothing I needed for myself. And then I created basically pass fail criteria. So all required forms returned. You're listing the instructions. So if somebody were covering for you for whatever reason to score this section, it says exactly what needs to be done. A note can be listed, and then each one of the documents that was required. And again, a note for what it's for. So let me show you a preview of what it looked like to me. So if I do all required forms returned, there's a checkbox for each one. And I would, if I click them all and then click save, and then I have to go to the next one, the next criteria, then there would be a button up here that's for submit. And that's what a lot of people were missing. They were clicking all the boxes and saving it, but then it was just, and it was showing, I think what it was showing was like,
It's in progress.
I can't remember if it said in progress or It definitely didn't say
Processing.
complete, it was something like I think the color was completely done, but it still showed them outstanding, I think, on the other side. So, but let's see here. But it's nice because you can see how you build it out to make sure that it's the way that you want it to be. And then this is one that I had created that all requirements were included as well. Like, so we have required forms in this particular scope of work outlined, and then requirements in terms of licenses, conflict of interest, compliance with the specs, and that they included this separate report. And then I could put a note somewhere in here, you know, if something was missing or so on and so forth. Let's see, the team is just gonna show me. And with the suppliers, this is how I select it. Originally, it had it right up here, like responding to suppliers available, and I have to like push them down into the evaluation section. So if I deemed that one of them wasn't, for whatever reason, if there was something that, I don't know what would have not qualified them to like, for me to review them, but it becomes more important in the evaluator round, because if I had determined one of them didn't meet the minimum requirements, then I'm not gonna shove them into the evaluation round for the main committee, if that makes sense.
Okay, so like if they didn't sign it, say for instance.
Yeah, I mean,
Or
they
whatever
didn't
used to
submit
do.
all the documents
Yes.
they needed.
and again, it's, you know, kind of along the lines of what we determine is a waivable, you know, minor discrepancy, you know, like Brian just had one the other day where, I think it had to do with, they signed one form saying that they held a particular, you know, license or whatever, but they didn't really, you know, that's not grounds, they just weren't reading what they were signing, you know. But if it's something big, like they didn't include a cost proposal that was required to be submitted separately, you know, that's not a waivable thing, so I wouldn't move them into the next one.
But how do you move them?
So you can't, unfortunately, because I don't have one that's closed right now, these ones are done, I can't show you, but it's kind of similar to when we do complete award for an RFP on NGEM, it does the same thing, like it or even if you're releasing a bid, when you unseal it, you know how it goes from closed to unsealed, it kind of does something similar. I just think the button might have been like add responder or add supplier or something like that. But I can show you again, like in real time when we have that, and try to, as we're developing these knowledge-based job aids, so that way you guys can actually see the step-by-step when I build another one out. So this is the actual committee evaluation round. So on this very first page, you know, I titled it exactly what it is, that I'm doing it by weighted percentages, and then whatever we have determined is the date that the evaluators need to be done by. It'll also send them reminders. There's a couple of different options on here. I think the other ones are like 3 days ahead of time. I think there's only 2 others. But it'll send them consistent reminders until the due date. Now down here, I have not included them with bid tabulations because, as you know, with RFPs, that doesn't give them any information. That's not something they need. So it was kind of extra material that I didn't feel like adding. But I gave them the full supplier response, all of the attachments that we requested, any optional attachments that they uploaded, as well as all of the bid documents. So that way they have access to the scope of work that outlined all the evaluation criteria, anything else supplemental that we provided, so that way they can determine if they responded correctly. Again, I had the scoring guide and the evaluator instructions in here again, in case for whatever reason the chair didn't share it with them, they have access to those documents here. And then this is the scoring criteria. Now you'll notice here on the left side, this is the library. It shows ours, but also other public agency stuff that's saved. So, and it is very clunky, but if you create anything here, it only lives in this bin. And I luckily figured that out after creating 2, because then I had to re-input all of it into the library. There's no way to save something that you put in here like into the library.
I mean, you have to do it.
Yeah, it was well, so that's why I tried to do it where once I figured that out, I just built it all into the library and then dragged and dropped it. And I've also noticed when I've copied things from other agencies that sometimes the scoring stuff doesn't even let you move forward. So I don't know, it's just so weird how it works. So sometimes even what you have in the library may not even be configured properly to use on a bid. But anyway, so in this one, and I'm gonna show you the other bid that I had as well, but this one was just specific to the evaluation criteria and the scope of work, because I've already done the pre-qualification to make sure that they met all of the minimum qualifications. Now, when I built these out, I had them kind of in order of exactly how they were listed in the scope of work, and then whatever information that we may or may not have had related to how to evaluate that. So in this instance, this is related to the fee. So these are instructions that are going to the evaluator. So review the proposal, select a rating based on favorability of the cost proposal and payment terms. In terms of the audit approach, we had very specific criteria, adequacy of proposed staffing plan, adequacy of sampling techniques, so if there is something that's already in the scope of work that you have, putting it here so the evaluator has that information. And if you don't, and if you need help, those are things that Mel and I are happy to help you guys
So
with
is the
configuring.
sorry to interrupt.
No worries.
Get in my own world. Audit approach, is that something we're gonna have to read to you?
Yes.
Is that like, okay.
Do you mean the
Audit
instructions or, oh, no, that was specific to this because it was for audit services.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm just listing
What you got.
yes, I mean,
This was her criteria.
Oh, okay.
specific.
Yeah.
I was like, what?
ones that are probably similar across the board are probably 1, 3, and 4.
Okay.
For the most part. I know they are on a lot of my bids. They're ones that I standardize if they don't know what they want to evaluate people on. But then you'll notice down here too that I have, a note is just optional. So if the evaluator wants to make a note, they can. Then this is where I put in what the weight for that criteria is, because they're going to be using the 1 to 5 scale. And that I have it as a drop-down list, but again, when you click in, I don't think it'll show it. Okay, well, I input every single one of these, but that's why they have the rubric, so it tells them what each score means, and so on and so forth. So these are all the same type. I'm putting in the percentage weight, and that's what may differ. Like maybe you guys would use some of the same criteria, and then the percentage weight is different each time. So what we're trying to do is, if you guys can kind of give us, if you do have some criteria that you tend to use on every single bid, send that to me and Desi so we can start building it out in the library. And then if you're just adjusting the weights, each time, then that's easy to configure. But just so you're not having to start from scratch.
We
and
would
have something-
adjust the weights in this right here.
Yes, right here each time. But at least from this side, you would just be able to drag and drop it and then just change the weight according to what you're doing. But so that way you can see what it looks like for the evaluator. It's very similar. They get to have a drop-down box for whatever score, and they can make a note, as to why they gave it that score if they wanted to.
Yeah, so it's easier for them.
So
Yeah.
do we still give them the option of doing the weights of where they want it? Like, I don't know, this is the thing that we used to do, or forgetting, but we used to say, okay, how much weight do you want to go towards this to equal 100? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so so we would get that information from them ahead of time.
Oh,
before.
okay. So that's.
And that way it's noted here. Yeah. So, if they have no idea, I'd give them my recommendation and then they can adjust it ahead of time. But when I'm building out the bid, then I'm gonna throw in whatever is the final weights that we decided.
Yeah, I always send them one like with mine and say, do you want to make any changes?
Adjust it, or okay. I'm trying to see, where's the screen it shows. Okay, so here, and this is how you can check to make sure it aligns. So it will show you, what the minimum and maximum scores that they can give, and then what percentage you've listed, and if it equals 100%. So that'll be a good checker for you as well.
That's awesome.
Now this is where you're gonna add all of the evaluators. And let's see if you can't see it, but it's just adding like when you do for an external invitee, when you're drafting a bid. Most of them aren't, they're like, I've had to manually add a lot of them. And also you'll notice, I don't think on this one it shows it, on my other bid it did. Somebody who already has had access to the system will show as like system user. Like I'm shown as that. Like if I go back to the buyer round that I had, I'm shown as a system user. And anybody who like doesn't even have an account at NGEM, like they are basically able to access it through this separate portal, and that's what those instructions gave them ahead of time. They don't have to have a login or anything. It kind of gives them like a unique link to get in and just submit these.
So when we send this, does NGEM send them the notice?
So once we add them here, well, I should say, once we add them here and we open the evaluation round, then they get the information. So I'll have to, again, I need to have one that's open so I can show you what that looks like. But basically all of this like lives in draft until the bid's closed. And then I open the scoring rounds, which sends out the information.
So you have to have everything ready before you open.
I mean, and the thing is too, is that it's kind of nice in that regard, because the 2 bids that I had to do it on were kind of a rush, and I didn't have an opportunity to like really fix all of the evaluation criteria by the time the bid was released. So it was nice that I had that cushion until it actually closed to get it all finished, because they were still kind of going through like how they wanted to, you know, like who they wanted to have on the committee and
So
so
you
on and
can
so
go
forth.
back in when it's after it's issued.
Yeah, so like I could add another person, yeah, you know, things like that. And then once I had opened it, the bid was unsealed. Like I said, it showed the responding suppliers here, and I basically moved them to ones to evaluate. So that way, when all of the evaluators got the email, they were able to access those documents from those particular suppliers. And then on this audit history, yeah, it shows what I did, that I opened it up. Then when I closed it, once I had all of the scores input, and I also have some of these emails up so that way you can see what it looks like. So these are notifications I got each time one of the evaluator submitted their scores. So you get a confirmation once they've done it. So when I was looking at, for instance, that page where it shows the status of everybody and the ones who hadn't done it, that's kind of like a double check of people who didn't submit it. And I could go in and look at their evaluation, and I can see that they checked all the boxes, but they didn't hit submit. Yeah. And so I knew exactly what the problem was. But also I didn't get, you know, this confirmation for certain evaluators.
So my question, sorry, I've dealt with them because I've got so many coming up. So this, do they have to submit and agree to the NDA in here before they will send a link to be an evaluator?
No, the link to be an evaluator is what gives them access
To the NDA portion?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they won't get a link to any documents until, like, it's all grayed out
Got
on
it.
top. So they have that first screen. Right. Let's see. They have this first screen, and then up here, it doesn't look like this. It kind of has like this, instructions, attachments, whatever, and all of them are grayed out. They can't click on them. So it's not until they put in their name.
So, but you send them like the instructions via email.
I've given them to
beforehand.
the chair to share with them, but then I have them here as well, so that way.
Okay, so you don't send them to everyone.
No, just because, like, I expect the chair to share it with them, so if they have any questions on how to access the system or they're having difficulty, but then I also have them here because it also talks about the steps once they have access to the system, so that way they just have it for ease of reference. Let me see. Okay, and then another example, so once they're completely done, you get a notice that all evaluators have submitted scores. So that way I know I can close that scoring round, and then like once they are ready to award it, like all these pieces are done.
So how come there were 2 scoring rounds on this one?
So we opted to qualify the submittals. Normally I would have that, and let me show you the other bit that I did. Normally I have that on the evaluators. I have like the pass fail on their side.
But then wouldn't we have 2 if we did like the scoring, and then wouldn't we have another for presentations?
If they're doing them. In this
Right.
instance, they weren't doing
Right,
interviews.
but if they
Yes.
were, then would they be reissued the invite for the presentations?
No, that would just be a separate scoring round that they would just access after the presentations were done.
So we would have to have it already set up before, when the bid's issued?
Well, when it closes, because that's actually a good question. I would imagine it has to be done when it closes, because I don't think once you open the scoring round, I don't know if you have the ability to add another one. I think you'd need to have the like shortlist, scoring round, and then the interview scoring round already set up by the time you open it all. But that's something I haven't had to do yet with these bids. So yeah, so that's a good question. So this was one where we just had one scoring round and let's see, so we had one scoring round, but two different sections that had to be scored. So the first one was all pass fail. Did they comply with the submittal requirements? So did they include their background experience, their approach, their cost proposal, so on and so forth? Just ensuring that it's correct. Now, the way that this RFP was structured, that was one of the evaluation criteria, was compliance with RFP specifications, which is why it has a percentage of 25%. Then we separated out the stuff that was pass fail by the other things that were evenly weighted as well, 25% across the board, in terms of the cost and payment terms being favorable, able to perform the services and qualifications. So
for the pass fail, the evaluators, they could have 0 or 5, that's it, that's their only two
Yep.
choices. Okay.
Yep, and then because they and that's the thing, not every RFP is even gonna have this as an evaluation criteria, which in those instances, when it's not an evaluation criteria, it's gonna be like the other example I showed you where I did the qualification separately. So yeah.
And you had mentioned on the last one, there's certain information you entered that goes into the library, and then there's certain information you said lives with that bid and that current bid
Yeah.
only. What are those? Where's the
Okay,
difference
so
in that?
if there was something I could, I tried to go through certain agencies' things and pull it over if I thought it was relevant. But if it wasn't, then it's like I have to create a new criteria each time. It's not gonna show me it because I don't have this open right now. But it's basically like you're clicking on this and it says like add new group, and this was my group. And then I have to click on this, and then I have to click a new criteria. And then once I get into that
Manual.
criteria, everything is manual. So
Well, I
it's,
think we need to revisit this when you do get one of those.
yeah, and Desi will help me, I'll probably I'm hoping that the next one I have, I'll have way more time. These were like in a blind
So
rush
fast.
to get set up, so I had no time to screenshot it as I was going through.
Yeah,
But yeah, I'm hoping that one of the ones that we have going forward, I'll be able to actually do that so you guys can see as it goes forward. And maybe by that point, INWA will actually put something together. But I almost wonder if they're not, just because it's so different for, every,
Each evaluation and how each one does it.
usually
Yes.
always conform to RP specs is always usually one of them.
Yeah.
All that stuff is usually standard.
So, but you have to specify exactly what type, it's gonna be, like the type, how it's gonna display, the weight. I was kind of frustrated, there is no way to do pass fail where there's no points. It will not let you do it, so
Yes.
it doesn't matter what it is, yeah. Even though this does not have an asterisk,
What?
it does not 0. So, I had to do something.
Really?
Yeah, it's super annoying.
No.
But that's all feedback that I plan on giving them. Let's see here, but again, if you're back at this is where it'll total up everything. So if you were to have, different sets of criteria, like a pass fail section, and then ones that were, actually weighted or whatever, it subtotals them and then totals the whole thing. Now, to see what it looks like at the very end, you have 2 different reports that it populates. And so if we were ever to get, a public records request, and the other thing you can see, I think you can see it on this one. You can anonymize the evaluators as well. Yeah, I haven't done it yet because I haven't gotten a request, but I want to kind of try that to see what that ends up looking like, because I think it gives you, if I remember correctly from one of the webinars I had to watch, it gives you whatever, if it's evaluator 1, evaluator 2, it gives you some sort of rubric, a guide to refer to. But this one shows the whole event overview. So whatever you have on the event details tab, it's going to throw here. Then it has a pretty summary of each firm, their total score, and then each of the different evaluation criteria and what they scored. There's a separate tab for the evaluators. This has exactly what the different criteria are, what the choices were, what the weight was, and the instructions.
Now, this can be made public or this.
Yeah, you can. I mean, this
but
is
can
how
you
it's
just delete the evaluator's name.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
how we do on
on the bid tabulation and stuff, yeah, or the other score sheets, yep.
Mhm.
So, I mean, this is just how it spits out, so we can choose, what we need to, but for instance, if you get a request of, the score sheets, if that's all they're asking for, then, we could submit.
Or just do the summary.
Do the summary, or if they wanna know, I don't know, like by evaluator, this is what would get anonymized, and then they could see how it differed, across the board.
Well, we could just try summary for.
And it ranks them as well, so that's kind of cool. And
it's so
then-
great, cause no one can mess up your formula.
I love it.
Yeah.
Place and all of that.
This is so cool.
And then this is where all the notes live. And you can see a bunch of people made notes. So,
But that wouldn't go to the vendor.
no, unless they specifically call out, which I've had on some public records requests lately, correspondence, notes, blah, 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 about bids. And then this one is just all the scores. It's a little bit messier. And this report is pretty similar, but this one was by evaluator. So if they wanted the individual score sheets for each evaluator, this is the one you would use.
So who got awarded this?
Nobody yet, because they need their, both firms are gonna present,
Oh.
so.
Okay.
So, yeah,
But then aren't you gonna have the scoring thing again after presentation?
no, because it's presentation to, Board of Regents. Yeah.
So I have an RFP on, can I use this for my RFP when I open it? Can I try it, or are we gonna let us free on that yet?
Oh, have you already put one out?
Mhm.
How long do you have?
If it's already out.
Oh, till March, yeah,
Till
okay.
April.
As long as it isn't closed yet.
Yeah, as long
No,
as
it's not
closed.
closed, I just put up, I want to try it for when it opens.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we could totally schedule some time to go
Okay.
through each of those things,
Okay.
and set it up, because that would be a good opportunity, especially if it's something that you think are criteria that could be used for other bids you do, then we can just have them in the library. But yeah,
Okay,
it's,
that would be awesome.
I mean, it's really cool. I mean, I really like it. You close each, like, so I think I had to close on the other one. I think I had to close my round first of where I was qualifying them before it would let me go to the next, like, open the next round. Yeah, I think I had to close this one first. Then I was able to open this one.
This really makes the process very professional. It's
Mhm.
standardized
Oh, yeah.
easily once it's set up, and then for the evaluators, it comes across as very professional, so I like it a lot.
I like it too.
Yeah, I'd like to see what it looks like to them. I'm trying to remember if somebody forwarded us an email of what it looked like. Or like what the email they received was. But yeah, I mean, it's,
How did Chris go?
that's who I was thinking we have. I'll have to go back and look. But it's really nice. It avoids us having to send and collect NDAs.
NGAs, yeah.
And that's a big piece of it.
And way less email
Mhm.
exchange too, because it all happens in the system. That's awesome.
Mhm. Yep, and I think for the one that Chris did, he wanted them to be reminded like every single day.
Yeah.
That's
That's
weird.
And is
But
there
it's
an
nice.
option for a robo call as well?
I know, right? I know. But it's nice because it takes care of like all of that follow-up for you essentially, and like Mel said, when I was asked, however many each freaking day, who had done it, I was able to send them a quick screenshot of that status, and yeah. So,
And then they bugged them.
yeah,
To get it done, so.
and it got done pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So yeah, so this is a nice,
Yeah.
and that's the thing, I think once we get it built out, it'll be pretty good. It is a little clunky, the way it works, but so far, like, the feedback that I think some of the other agencies have gotten has been really positive, by their evaluators and then by bidders too, so. And they're not posting anything, like, they don't post anything, in terms of the, shortlist or scores.
Right.
They don't
They don't
none of that unless asked, or release it, I should say.
They would just do award like Like.
Yeah. So, but any questions? You know, that's a lot of those, but if I have one that comes up where I probably will, because with some of the RFQs that we do, there's always like a short list and then a interview component. So that way you guys could see what those rounds look like. But generally speaking, I don't usually qualify them. I don't know if you guys do, or if you put that on the committee to make sure that they've submitted everything that they're supposed to and complied with the RFP specs.
Yeah, I'm also do the committee unless it's something that's obviously that I can call out to the committee before, like, yeah, they didn't submit this, because I will look at it
Yeah.
beforehand, just to be sure. You know, but if anything's called out, then I'll call it out beforehand to them. If they have anything, they'll call it out.
Because I am trying to find some more use case for like, there's a lot of ones in that library that are like buyer specific criteria. So, yeah. So anyway,
Okay.
yeah, it's really cool. That's cool. Any questions about anything else? we covered? Love covering this on a Monday afternoon.
Information by fire.
Yes. Alright, and I think unless anybody else has anything to add.